My wife, who ate fast food daily, told me I needed to take better care of myself by losing 20 pounds. So I filed for divorce and said I was taking care of myself starting today. I was meal prepping chicken and vegetables on a Sunday afternoon when Vanessa walked into the kitchen carrying 2 large bags from McDonald's. The smell hit me first, that distinct combination of grease and salt that she brought home at least 5 times a week. She set the bags on the counter right next to my carefully portioned containers of grilled chicken, brown rice, and steamed broccoli. Then she looked at my meal prep, looked at me, and said the words that ended our marriage. She said I really needed to start taking better care of myself because I'd gained at least 20 pounds since our wedding 3 years ago, and it was becoming noticeable. I looked down at my body, then at her standing there holding a Big Mac in one hand, and asked if she was serious right now. She said completely serious, that she was worried about my health and my appearance, and she thought I should consider joining a gym or seeing a nutritionist. I put down the knife I was using to slice chicken breast and told her I wanted a divorce. I'd met Vanessa 5 years earlier at a corporate wellness seminar my company required all employees to attend. The irony wasn't lost on me now. She worked in marketing and I worked in software development, and we both sat in the back row making sarcastic comments about the presenter's overly enthusiastic approach to mindfulness meditation. She was funny and sharp and had this way of making even boring corporate events feel entertaining. We exchanged numbers and went for coffee the next day. She ordered a black coffee and a fruit cup. I ordered the same. We talked for 3 hours about everything except work, and I walked away thinking I'd met someone special. The early months of dating were easy and natural. Vanessa ran half marathons and did yoga 3 times a week. She introduced me to meal planning and convinced me to train for a 10K with her. We'd cook healthy dinners together on weeknights and allow ourselves one indulgent meal on weekends. I lost 15 pounds in the first 6 months we dated without really trying. I felt better than I had in years. She told me constantly how much she appreciated that I took care of myself and valued health as much as she did. I thought we were building a life together based on shared values and mutual respect. Looking back, I realized I was building something alone while she was already changing into someone else. The shift started slowly about 8 months after our wedding. Vanessa got promoted to senior marketing director, which meant longer hours and more stress. She started skipping her yoga classes and sleeping through her morning runs. I noticed but didn't comment because I understood work stress. Then the fast food started appearing. First, it was once a week, grabbing something quick on her way home from a late meeting. I'd offer to save her some of the dinner I'd made, but she'd say she already ate and disappear into her home office. By month 3 of her new position, she was eating takeout 4 nights a week. By month 6, I couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten a meal I cooked. I tried to be supportive without being judgmental. I asked if she wanted to meal prep together on Sundays like we used to, and she snapped that she didn't have time for that anymore. I suggested we sign up for a 5K together, and she said she was too tired after work to train. I mentioned gently that I was worried about her health, and she accused me of calling her fat. I wasn't. I never said anything about her weight. I was genuinely concerned about her well-being because I loved her and wanted her to be healthy. But she heard every expression of concern as an attack on her body, and after a few of those conversations, I stopped bringing it up entirely. The weight gain was significant over the next 18 months. Vanessa went from a size 8 to a size 18. I didn't care about the number or the size. I cared that she seemed unhappy and unhealthy, constantly complaining about being tired and having headaches and not sleeping well. I cared that the person I married who valued health and fitness had completely abandoned those values without explanation. I cared that when I tried to talk about it, she shut down or got defensive. But I learned to keep my mouth shut and focus on my own health, which I maintained by continuing to work out 5 days a week and meal prep every Sunday. Then the comments started coming from Vanessa, directed at me. Small things at first, easy to dismiss. She'd watch me measure out my portions at dinner and say I was being obsessive about food. She'd see me heading to the gym on Saturday morning and ask if I was training for the Olympics or just couldn't stand spending time with her. She'd make jokes about my protein shakes tasting like dirt and my grilled chicken being dry and boring. I laughed them off initially because I thought she was just processing her own changes by deflecting onto me. I was wrong. The first real warning sign came during Thanksgiving dinner at her parents' house last year. Her mother had made the usual spread of turkey and mashed potatoes and pies, and I filled my plate with reasonable portions of everything, enjoying the holiday meal without overdoing it. Vanessa piled her plate high twice and went back for thirds, which was fine. It's Thanksgiving. But when her sister Joanna commented that Vanessa might want to slow down, Vanessa turned to me and said loudly in front of the whole family that at least she wasn't obsessed with her body like some people. Everyone looked at me. I felt my face get hot. Her father asked what she meant, and Vanessa said I spent an unhealthy amount of time at the gym and refused to eat normal food, always insisting on my boring diet meals. She made me sound like I had an eating disorder when all I did was maintain basic healthy habits. I didn't defend myself at her family's table because I didn't want to create a scene. But on the drive home, I told Vanessa that what she said was unfair and untrue. She said she was just being honest about her observations. I pointed out that I worked out 5 days a week for an hour, which was well within normal health recommendations, and I ate a balanced diet that included treats and indulgences in moderation. She said my definition of moderation was extreme. I asked her what she wanted me to do differently, and she said she didn't know. She just wished I'd relax more and not make her feel bad about her choices. I told her I'd never made her feel bad about anything. She said my mere existence doing what I did made her feel bad. That sentence hung in the air for the rest of the 20-minute drive home. Christmas brought more of the same. Vanessa's weight continued to climb, her fast food consumption increased to nearly every meal, and her comments about my habits became more frequent and more cutting. She started telling our friends that I was vain and spent more time looking at myself in the mirror than talking to her. She told her mother I was controlling about food and made her feel guilty for eating. She told her co-workers I was secretly judging everyone's weight and probably had body dysmorphia. I heard all of this secondhand from people who cared enough to tell me what she was saying behind my back. When I confronted her, she denied everything or claimed I was misunderstanding her venting. I started documenting things in January because I had this creeping feeling that something bigger was happening that I didn't understand yet. I kept a simple log on my phone noting when Vanessa ate fast food, what comments she made about my health habits, and how our interactions went. It felt paranoid at the time, but I'd learned from a previous relationship that when someone starts rewriting history or gaslighting you about your own behavior, documentation becomes essential. The log showed a clear pattern. Vanessa ate fast food an average of 11 times per week. She made negative comments about my appearance or health habits an average of 3 times per day. She refused to engage in any activity that wasn't sedentary. She spent approximately $400 per month on takeout and delivery. The numbers were stark on the page. February brought the first health scare. Vanessa came home from work early one Wednesday afternoon, sweating and pale, saying she'd felt dizzy and her heart was racing during a meeting. I immediately said we should go to the emergency room, but she refused. She said she was probably just dehydrated and needed to rest. I brought her water and sat with her until her color came back and her breathing normalized. When she felt better, I gently suggested she make an appointment with her doctor for a checkup. She got defensive and said there was nothing wrong with her, that I was being dramatic, and that her dizziness was caused by stress from work, not her diet. I didn't push it because I didn't want to fight, but I was genuinely scared for her. The doctor appointment happened only because her mother insisted after I called and explained what had happened. Vanessa's mom drove her to the clinic and sat in the waiting room while Vanessa saw Dr. Lawrence Klein, who'd been her family physician for 12 years. I didn't go because Vanessa said my presence would stress her out. I waited at home for 4 hours until she returned. When she walked through the door, I asked what the doctor said. Vanessa told me everything was fine, just stress and dehydration like she'd thought, and the doctor said she should try to relax more and maybe cut back on caffeine. I asked if there were any concerns about her weight or diet, and she snapped that the doctor didn't mention it, and I needed to stop obsessing over her body. I later learned from Joanna, who heard from their mother, who heard from Vanessa herself, that Dr. Klein had actually been very concerned. He'd told Vanessa her blood pressure was dangerously high at 160/95, her cholesterol was elevated, and her blood sugar was pre-diabetic. He'd strongly recommended she change her diet, start exercising, and lose at least 30 pounds to reduce her risk of serious health complications. He'd offered to refer her to a nutritionist and suggested she might benefit from seeing a therapist to address the emotional aspects of her eating habits. Vanessa had apparently listened to everything, nodded along, and then completely disregarded every piece of advice while lying to me about what he'd said. That's when I realized I was living with someone who was not only destroying her own health, but actively lying about it while simultaneously criticizing mine. The hypocrisy was staggering, but more than that, the deception cut deep. I'd been her husband for 3 years, together for 5, and she couldn't be honest with me about something as basic as what her doctor said. I started questioning everything else she told me. If she could lie about her health, what else was she lying about? I hired a marriage counselor in March. Her name was Dr. Simone Rafferty, a licensed therapist with 16 years of experience in couples counseling. I found her through my insurance and booked a consultation without telling Vanessa because I needed professional guidance on how to approach the situation. Dr. Rafferty listened to my summary of events and asked perceptive questions about our communication patterns, Vanessa's behavior changes, and my own responses. She said it sounded like Vanessa was struggling with something deeper than just weight gain or stress, and that her criticism of me might be projection, a way of deflecting from her own struggles by focusing on perceived flaws in me. She recommended couples therapy as a first step, but warned me that it would only work if Vanessa was willing to participate honestly. Getting Vanessa to agree to therapy took 2 weeks of careful conversations. I framed it as something we both needed to work on our communication and connection, not as something she needed to fix about herself. She finally agreed on the condition that we wouldn't discuss her weight or eating habits, which I found frustrating but accepted, because at least we'd be in a room with a professional who could help us navigate the real issues. Our first session was on a Friday evening in mid-March. We sat on opposite ends of Dr. Rafferty's couch, and she asked us each to describe what brought us to therapy. I spoke first and tried to be diplomatic. I said we'd been struggling with communication lately, and I felt like we weren't connecting the way we used to. I mentioned that I was worried about Vanessa's health and felt shut out when I tried to talk about it. I said I wanted us to get back to being a team and supporting each other's well-being. Vanessa waited until I finished, then told a completely different story. She said I'd become obsessed with fitness and diet to the point where it was affecting our marriage. She said I made her feel inadequate and judged, She said I spent more time at the gym than with her and cared more about my appearance than our relationship. She said she was exhausted from walking on eggshells around someone who was clearly dealing with body image issues and taking them out on her. Dr. Rafferty asked Vanessa to provide specific examples of my behavior that made her feel judged. Vanessa said I measured all my food, which implied her portions were wrong. She said I turned down dessert frequently, which made her look bad when she ate it. She said I woke up early to work out, which meant I prioritized exercise over morning time with her. Every example was something I did for myself that had nothing to do with her, yet she'd interpreted all of it as a personal attack. Dr. Rafferty gently pointed out that my behaviors sounded like standard health maintenance, not obsession, and asked if there might be other factors contributing to Vanessa's feelings. Vanessa shut down completely and said she didn't want to talk about it anymore. We left that first session with homework. Dr. Rafferty asked us both to write down 3 things we appreciated about each other and share them before our next appointment. She asked Vanessa to consider whether her feelings about my health habits might be connected to her own feelings about her health. She asked me to make sure I was carving out quality time with Vanessa that didn't involve any discussion of food or fitness. We agreed to try, though I could tell Vanessa was already checked out of the process. The second session never happened because Vanessa canceled it the morning of and refused to reschedule. She said therapy was making things worse by forcing her to confront things she wasn't ready to deal with. I went alone and met with Dr. Rafferty to discuss next steps. She said Vanessa's unwillingness to engage suggested she wasn't ready to work on the marriage, and I needed to prepare myself for the possibility that Vanessa's issues were too deep for couples counseling to address without her individual therapy first. She recommended I focus on my own well-being and set clear boundaries about what I was willing to accept in the relationship. She also suggested I consult with a lawyer to understand my options, not because divorce was inevitable, but because being informed would help me make clear decisions. I didn't want to believe it had come to that point. I still loved Vanessa, or at least I loved the person she used to be, and I wanted to believe we could find our way back to each other. But over the next month, things deteriorated rapidly. Vanessa's fast food consumption increased to the point where she was eating it for every single meal, including breakfast. Our credit card statement showed charges at McDonald's, Burger King, Taco Bell, Wendy's, and KFC, sometimes 3 times in one day. She gained another 15 pounds in those 4 weeks. Her clothes stopped fitting, and she refused to buy new ones in larger sizes, instead wearing stretched-out leggings and my oversized t-shirts around the house. She stopped showering regularly. She stopped caring about her appearance entirely. And through all of it, she kept making comments about my obsessive health habits and my vanity and my supposed body dysmorphia. The breaking point came on that Sunday afternoon in late April when I was meal prepping and she came home with McDonald's. The audacity of her standing in our kitchen, watching me prepare healthy food for the week ahead, while holding a bag of fast food and telling me I needed to take better care of myself because I'd gained 20 pounds, broke something fundamental in me. I hadn't gained any weight. I weighed exactly 175 pounds, the same weight I'd maintained for 3 years. I had the scale readings on my fitness app to prove it. Meanwhile, Vanessa had gained approximately 80 pounds since our wedding and was eating herself into serious health problems while accusing me of neglecting my health. I looked at her standing there in my stretched-out t-shirt, grease from her burger already staining her fingers, and said very calmly that I wanted a divorce. She laughed. She actually laughed like I'd made a joke. She said I was being dramatic over one comment and needed to relax. I told her I wasn't being dramatic, that I'd been documenting her behavior for months, that I'd tried therapy and communication and concern, and none of it worked because she refused to acknowledge reality. She stopped laughing. She asked what I meant by documenting her behavior, and I pulled out my phone and showed her the log. Every fast food purchase, every critical comment, every lie about her doctor appointment, all of it recorded with dates and times and details. Vanessa's face went through several emotions quickly. Shock, then anger, then something that looked like fear. She said I was insane for keeping a log like some kind of stalker. She said I'd violated her privacy and her trust. She said this proved I was controlling and obsessive, and she'd been right to worry about my mental health. I stayed calm and told her the log wasn't stalking. It was documentation of a pattern of behavior that had become intolerable. I said I was done being criticized for maintaining my health by someone who was destroying hers. I said I was done being lied to and gaslighted and made to feel crazy for noticing objective reality. I was taking care of myself starting today by filing for divorce. Vanessa tried several tactics over the next hour to change my mind. First, she apologized and said she didn't mean what she'd said, that she was just stressed and took it out on me. I pointed out that the stress excuse didn't explain months of behavior. Then she cried and said she needed me and couldn't handle a divorce right now with everything else going on at work. I said her work stress didn't give her permission to treat me poorly. Then she got angry and said I was abandoning her when she needed support, that I was proving I never really loved her. I said loving someone didn't mean accepting abuse and lies. Finally, she threatened that if I went through with this, she'd tell everyone I'd been emotionally abusive and controlling, that I'd forced her to feel bad about her weight, and that she'd make sure our friends and family knew what kind of person I really was. That threat confirmed I was making the right decision. Someone who loved me wouldn't threaten to destroy my reputation to prevent me from leaving an unhealthy marriage. I told Vanessa I was staying in a hotel until I could find an apartment, and I'd be contacting a lawyer first thing Monday morning. She screamed that I couldn't just leave, that this was her house too, and she wasn't going anywhere. I calmly reminded her that we rented the place, and both our names were on the lease. But I was choosing to be the one to leave because I needed space from her. I packed a suitcase, grabbed my laptop and important documents, and walked out while she stood in the kitchen yelling about what a terrible person I was. The hotel was a Hampton Inn 20 minutes from our apartment. I checked in and sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, trying to process what had just happened. My marriage was ending. The person I'd loved and built a life with had become someone I didn't recognize and didn't want to be around. I felt sad and relieved and terrified all at once. I called my brother Dominic that night and told him everything. He listened without interrupting, then said he'd seen this coming for over a year and was glad I finally stood up for myself. He said Vanessa had been treating me poorly for months, and everyone in our family had noticed, but didn't know how to bring it up without making things worse. He offered to help me move once I found a new place, and said I could stay with him and his wife if the hotel got too expensive. Monday morning, I called 3 divorce lawyers from the list Dr. Rafferty had given me. The first 2 couldn't see me for weeks, but the third, an attorney named Barbara Yates with 23 years of family law experience, had a cancellation and could meet that afternoon. Her office was in a building downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. She was in her 50s with gray hair pulled back in a bun and a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately put me at ease. I showed her my documentation, explained the situation, and asked what my options were. Barbara reviewed my phone log and asked detailed questions about our finances, assets, and the timeline of Vanessa's behavior changes. She took notes on a yellow legal pad and occasionally nodded or frowned at certain details. When I finished explaining everything, she looked up and said I had a straightforward case for no-fault divorce based on irreconcilable differences. She said my documentation would be helpful if Vanessa tried to make false claims about abuse or controlling behavior, but she hoped it wouldn't come to that. She explained the process, the timeline, and the likely outcomes. We had no children, no shared property beyond basic household items, and separate retirement accounts. The divorce should be relatively clean, unless Vanessa decided to make it complicated. I retained Barbara that day and authorized her to file the divorce petition. She said she'd have the papers drawn up and served to Vanessa within the week. She advised me to separate our finances immediately, close joint credit cards, and document any communication with Vanessa in case things got contentious. She also recommended I inform my employer's HR department about the situation in case Vanessa tried to cause problems at my work, which she said happened more often than people realized in divorces that turned nasty. I thanked her and left feeling like I'd taken the first real step toward reclaiming my life. Separating our finances took 2 days of phone calls and bank visits. We had a joint checking account that held about $8,000, and I transferred half into a new account at a different bank. I called the credit card companies and removed myself as an authorized user on Vanessa's cards and requested new cards for myself on accounts I'd opened independently. I changed the password on our shared streaming services and online accounts, then realized how petty that was and changed them back because I didn't want to be that person. I contacted the landlord and explained that we'd be breaking the lease early and asked about the penalty. She was sympathetic and said if I could find someone to take over the lease, she'd waive the fees. Vanessa found out about the divorce filing when she was served papers at her office on Thursday afternoon. She called me immediately, screaming so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. She said I'd humiliated her in front of her co-workers by having her served at work. She said I was ruining her life and her reputation. She said she'd fight this and make sure I didn't get a penny from her. I calmly reminded her we had separate finances and equal claim to our minimal shared assets, so there wasn't much to fight over. She hung up on me and then sent a series of increasingly unhinged text messages over the next 3 hours calling me every name she could think of. Barbara advised me to stop responding to Vanessa's messages and let all communication go through her. She said emotional responses would only escalate things and give Vanessa ammunition to use against me. I followed her advice and blocked Vanessa's number, routing everything to email where I could respond rationally and with my lawyer's guidance. The email Vanessa sent that night was 10 paragraphs long, detailing how I was a narcissist who'd manipulated her throughout our marriage, made her feel worthless, and was now abandoning her when she needed support. She said she was going to tell everyone we knew the truth about what I'd done to her. She copied her entire family and several of our mutual friends on the email. The responses from her family and friends started coming within hours. Her mother sent me a scathing message about how disappointed she was in me for giving up on marriage so easily. Her sister Joanna sent a more measured note saying she was sorry things had come to this and hoped we could work it out. 2 of our mutual friends sent messages asking if I was okay and what they could do to help. One couple we'd been friends with for years sent a cold message saying they'd be supporting Vanessa through this difficult time and wouldn't be maintaining contact with me. I was hurt by that, but not surprised. Vanessa had always been better at managing social relationships than me, and I knew she'd turn people against me if she could. I responded only to the people who seemed genuinely concerned with a brief, factual explanation. I said Vanessa and I had grown apart, that I'd tried to work on the marriage through counseling but she'd been unwilling to engage, and that the decision to divorce was mine but had been building for months. I didn't mention her weight, or her eating habits, or her lies, because I didn't want to be accused of attacking her when she couldn't defend herself. I kept everything focused on incompatibility and irreconcilable differences. Most people seemed to accept that explanation, though I knew Vanessa was telling a very different story to anyone who would listen. Finding an apartment took less time than expected. I found a one-bedroom place in a newer building closer to my office, signed a lease, and moved in over one weekend with help from Dominic and 2 friends from work. The apartment was smaller than the place Vanessa and I had shared, but it was mine alone, and I could set it up however I wanted without worrying about anyone's input. I bought new furniture that I liked without consulting anyone. I stocked the kitchen with healthy food and meal prep containers. I set up my home gym in the second bedroom with weights and a yoga mat and a foam roller. Creating this space that was entirely mine felt like the first deep breath I'd taken in months. Work became a refuge during this period. I threw myself into a major project we were launching and volunteered for extra responsibilities. My manager noticed and pulled me aside one day to ask if everything was okay. I'd taken his advice to inform HR about the divorce, and he'd been briefed on the situation. I told him I was going through a divorce but managing fine and actually appreciated having work to focus on. He said he understood, and to let him know if I needed any flexibility with schedule or workload. His support meant more than he probably realized. Having one part of my life that was stable and under my control helped me feel less adrift. The divorce process moved slowly through May and into June. Barbara filed the initial petition. Vanessa's lawyer responded with a counter-petition that asked for spousal support despite her making more money than me, and we went back and forth on asset division and timeline. Vanessa was dragging everything out as long as possible, changing her mind on agreements we'd already reached, making unreasonable demands, and generally being as difficult as the process allowed. Barbara said this was common when one spouse was angry about the divorce and wanted to punish the other. She advised patience and reminded me that eventually we'd either reach an agreement or go before a judge who'd decide for us. The turning point came in early July when we had our first mediation session. This was required by the court before we could proceed to trial if we couldn't reach an agreement. The mediator was a retired judge named Lawrence Fenton, who'd been doing this work for 15 years. We sat in separate rooms in his office, and he went back and forth between us carrying offers and counteroffers. After 3 hours of this, Judge Fenton asked if he could speak to both of us together. Barbara and Vanessa's lawyer agreed, and we all convened in the main conference room. Judge Fenton looked tired and slightly frustrated. He said he'd reviewed both our positions and our financial disclosures, and frankly, there was no reason this divorce should be contentious. We had no children, no significant shared assets, and both had good incomes. The only thing keeping us in mediation was stubbornness and hurt feelings. He said if we couldn't reach an agreement today, we'd go before a judge who would likely split everything 50-50 and award no spousal support to either party, which is what Barbara had been advising all along. He asked if we could act like adults and settle this so we could both move on with our lives. Vanessa started crying and said she couldn't believe I was doing this to her, that I'd promised to love her through everything and I was breaking that promise. Judge Fenton cut her off gently and said marriage vows went both ways, and from what he'd reviewed, both parties had contributed to the breakdown of the relationship. He asked if she was willing to accept the 50-50 split and move forward. Vanessa looked at me with such hatred, I actually felt it physically. Then she looked at her lawyer and nodded. We signed the mediation agreement that afternoon. The divorce was finalized in August, 3.5 months after I'd told Vanessa I wanted out. The judge signed the decree, and Barbara emailed me a copy with a note saying I was officially single again. I sat in my apartment reading through the legal language that ended my 5-year relationship and 3-year marriage, and felt mostly relief. Some sadness, too, for what we'd been and what we could have been if Vanessa had been willing to face her problems instead of projecting them onto me. But overwhelmingly, I felt free. The aftermath played out over the next few months in ways both predictable and surprising. Vanessa's social media became a platform for vague posting about toxic people and betrayal and finding strength after being abandoned. Mutual friends told me she'd gained another 20 pounds and was rarely leaving her apartment except for work. Her sister Joanna reached out in September to apologize for initially believing Vanessa's version of events. She said their mother had finally convinced Vanessa to see a therapist, and in the process, some truths had come out about Vanessa's struggles with depression and disordered eating that she'd been hiding for years. Joanna said the family was trying to get her help, but Vanessa was resistant. I felt sympathy for Vanessa despite everything. Mental health struggles were real and devastating, and I wished she'd been able to be honest about what she was going through instead of lashing out at me. But I also knew I'd made the right choice in leaving. I couldn't save someone who didn't want to be saved, and staying would have meant sacrificing my own well-being for someone who saw my health as a threat rather than an inspiration. That wasn't love. That was codependency. My own healing took time and work. I continued seeing Dr. Rafferty individually to process the end of my marriage and understand the patterns that had led me to stay as long as I did. She helped me see that I'd been people-pleasing and conflict-avoidant to my own detriment, accepting unacceptable behavior because I didn't want to be the bad guy who gave up on his marriage. She helped me develop stronger boundaries and clearer communication skills. She helped me trust myself again after months of being told my perceptions weren't real. I started dating again in November, cautiously and with clear intentions. I was honest on my profile about being recently divorced and looking for something healthy and balanced. I went on dates with women who took care of themselves and valued honesty and communication. Some dates went nowhere, which was fine. Others led to second and third dates and conversations about what we were looking for. I wasn't in a rush to find another relationship. I was content being single and building a life I loved. But I was open to meeting someone who'd add to that life, rather than require me to shrink to accommodate them. The biggest surprise came in December, when I ran into Vanessa at the grocery store. Literally ran into her, our carts bumping in the produce section. We both froze. She looked different, thinner than when I'd last seen her, wearing actual clothes instead of stretched leggings. Her cart was full of vegetables and lean proteins. Mine looked similar. We stared at each other for a long moment before she said hello. I said hello back. She asked how I was doing, and I said I was good, and asked the same. She said she was doing better, that she was in therapy and working on herself, and she wanted to apologize for how things ended. She said she'd been in a bad place and took it out on me in ways that were unfair and harmful. I appreciated the apology and told her so. I said I was glad she was getting help and taking care of herself. She asked if we could maybe have coffee sometime and talk, and I gently said I didn't think that was a good idea. Too much had happened, and we both needed to move forward separately. She looked sad, but nodded like she understood. We said goodbye and went our separate ways through the store. I felt peaceful about the encounter. There was no anger or resentment left, just a quiet acknowledgement that we'd been wrong for each other, and it was good we'd figured that out before wasting more years. A year after I filed for divorce, I was in the best shape of my life physically and mentally. I'd run a marathon in October and was training for a triathlon in the spring. I'd been promoted at work and was leading a team on a major new project. I'd reconnected with old friends and made new ones through running clubs and volunteer work. I was dating someone I really liked, a woman named Kendra, who was a physical therapist and understood the value of health and balance. We were taking things slow and building something genuine based on mutual respect and honesty. I thought about Vanessa sometimes, wondering how she was doing and hoping she'd found the help she needed. I bore her no ill will. She'd been struggling with things I couldn't fix, and she'd dealt with those struggles by attacking me instead of facing them herself. It wasn't right, but it was human and understandable. I'd chosen to protect myself by leaving, and that was the healthiest choice I'd ever made. Taking care of myself meant knowing when to walk away from situations that were hurting me, even when those situations involved people I loved. It meant trusting my own perceptions and setting boundaries without guilt. It meant building a life that made me happy rather than shrinking to fit someone else's dysfunction. The divorce taught me that you can't love someone into wellness, and you can't sacrifice your own health for someone who resents you for having it. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and the other person is to walk away and let them face their own demons without you there to project them onto. I was grateful for the lesson, even though learning it had been painful. I was grateful for the marriage too, for what it taught me about myself and what I wanted and what I wouldn't accept. And I was most grateful for that Sunday afternoon when I'd chosen myself over guilt and fear and misplaced loyalty. That was the day I started taking care of myself, and I never stopped. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.